Hello, my treasures! It is time for Heroes of Starcraft to make its way into Hearthstone as the next mini set. This mini set brings us the Zerg, Protoss, and Terran cards to synergize with some of the pre-existing cards, such as starships, and make some new strategies. We are going to be going over 11 brand new decks using most of the cards within the mini set, so you should be able to find something no matter what type of player you are. I happen to like a lot of big combos, so we're going to start with a combo deck, which is going to be Zerg Mill DK. The idea behind this is we are going to be using Viper as an additional card to make advantage of Bayfin Bodybuilder. This will allow us to drag out minions from our opponent's hand and then instantly destroy them with the Bodybuilder. We also will be discounting this through things like Nidris, Worm, and Grifta. We also have the backup plan of Dirty Rat, and we also have a fun little synergy between 8 Hands from Beyond and QGjPQGkPQGlfQGx to mill our opponent out that way. Now for the next deck, we got Zerg Starship Demon Hunter. This deck is going to be centered around the fact that most of the Zerg cards make for a pretty good aggro engine. The combination between Creep Tumor and Lurker should allow us to do an overwhelming amount of damage with a bunch of the cheap Zerglings that we'll be having in our deck and ways to get access to additional copies of them. We also do have essentially infinite resources if we can slam down a Brood Queen early enough, and then we can also use Kerrigan as a way to finish off our opponent. The starships are in here just as a way to buff up the wide boards that we're going to be building and should be really fun for any aggro fans out there. The next list is going to be Taunt Druid with a little bit of a Protoss twist. We are going to be trying to get Lothamar off of Champion of Azeroth in order to double the stats of Immortal, a key new card for the Protoss synergy within Druid. This will allow us to double the stats of our Immortal by spending 4 additional mana, and hopefully we can get these big enough to be able to overwhelm our opponent with a huge body, thus making it where we can finish them off really easily. We're also going to be using Carrier as a backup plan, just as a way to do 16 damage to our opponent's face if we can clear out the board. The next list is going to be Zerg Hunter, which is going to be centered around the fact that Spawning Pool allows us to get a additional Zergling within our hand, and what the Zerglings do is summon a copy of it whenever you slam them down. Thus, we can essentially stack the Shafar spell burst as much as we want to within this list, since we are going to be able to discover additional copies using the Discover package. Hopefully, then eventually hitting a King Plush that will be huge enough to just hit into our opponent's face and OTK them that way. And now for the deck that I'm probably most excited for out of them all, Artanis OTK Priest. This is going to be centered around Raza the Resealed. This will allow us to make it where we refresh our hero power whenever we play a card. Then we're going to be discounting it down to 0 with Papercraft Angel. Then we're going to use Sing Along Buddy to double that hero power each individual time, followed by a combination of Artanis, which has the hero power of giving a minion on the board plus 1 attack and Divine Shield, plus your hero, thus allowing us to use a 1-cost weapon off of weakness in order to use a Wind Fury weapon to hit into our opponent's face for a bajillion damage. This was a deck strategy that I really wanted to revisit before rotation happened with Reno, but Artanis gave me a great excuse to try this out with some new synergy cards. But if you want to play a more pure Protoss strategy, why not try out Protoss Mage? This deck is going to be centered around Colossus, which does 1 damage to all enemies twice, and is improved by playing Protoss spells during the game. We are going to be the class that can easily accomplish this the best, using Resonance Coil as a way to get a random Protoss spell, then using Rewind as a way to get additional copies of Coil or Shield Battery, and then hopefully discounting our Colossus enough so we can slam down multiple copies of this on the same turn, then allowing us basically to OTK our opponent, especially if we get a brand off of Champions of Azeroth. Should be really fun if you want a pure Protoss strategy. But let's get onto the first Terran deck of this video, which is going to be Terran Starship Paladin, which has a little bit of a hand buff twist. It is worth mentioning that all of the starships for all the Terran classes are going to be mechs, which means you can easily magnetize to them. That's making things like Drone Deconstructor as a really potent OTK tool if you can buff up the Spark Bots enough if you get a Wind Fury off of this. So we are going to be using some of the hand buff package in order to make this more available to us. Overall, the deck hopes to spam out a bunch of really cheap starships instead of building one humongous one, and then basically hit our opponent's face for a bunch of damage, while also using Hellion as a way to make full advantage of going wide that hand buff Paladin historically does do. And now for the last Protoss list, which is going to be Protoss Rogue, centered around the new High Templars turning into Archons. The Archons will do 8 damage to the enemy hero, and basically you get one of these by playing another Templar. This is going to be more of a meme combo where you're going to be trying to get additional copies of the Archons through things like a bounce back to bounce around Feet Corona in combination with Water Dancer and some cover artists. You know, it hopes to basically spam out like 4 or 5 of the Archons in a single turn, thus making it where you can easily OTK your opponent that way. We also do have kind of the backup strategy of just being able to spam out a bunch of really high cost minions for really cheap, which should allow you to win some games that way too. It's time to lift off with Starship Shaman with a bit of a mill twist using the new card Ghost, that if you're building a starship, destroy the lowest cost card in your opponent's hand. This in combination with Shutter Block will allow you to destroy 3 cards in a single turn due to the Ghost, but you also will have a lot of ways to get additional copies of both Shutter Block and Ghost through things like Brewmaster or Zola, thus making it where you can hopefully make your opponent have no cards in their hand while also swarming the board with a bunch of really cheap minions and a big starship that is going to be annoying for your opponent to deal with. And since we're talking about starships, let's get onto the last starship deck of the video, which is going to be Starship Highlander Warrior, centered around the fact that Warrior has a lot of really good Highlander cards, such as Brand to double all the battle cries that you have, which means you can double the battle cry of the Exodar and do essentially double the damage off of this battle cry. We also do have access to getting some of the other mill-ish cards, such as Ghost or in our ETC, Boom Boss, in order to then do a bunch of damage to our opponent's deck that way. But the main goal of the deck is to win through launching a bunch of starships over and over, just to be real fun that way. So we can then use Thor, which will deal 5 damage to a random enemy for each starship that we have launched this game. And now for the final deck. This one is a little bit weird, but it's Location Hand Warlock, centered around the new location of Ultras Cavern and Spine Crawler as a anti-aggro tool. And then you also using some of the previous ways to make use of Forge of Wills through Endgame and Dark Alley Pack, and using Seaside Giant and Mountain Giants as a way to spam a bunch of 8/8s out on board really quickly to make full advantage of everything else. Essentially, the game plan is just the old-fashioned stereotypical hand warlock list. All right, so those were all the decks that came out for this new mini set. Let me know down below which ones you're most excited to try out. I won't lie, the priest list is probably what's going to be uploaded tomorrow, but we shall see. Outside of that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, bye-bye.